If you are in need of a good movie that will make you remember what a great people we used to be, this is not a movie for you. If you think that you have thoroughly studied the problem and now only want to hear about bypass solutions because you want to avoid the unfinished task of breaking the invisible slavery chains that have continued long after the lie of Black Emancipation, this movie is also not for you. And if you are in need of a movie that will give you a temporary high and help you to forget the anguished voices of your enslaved ancestors that are still crying out for justice, this movie is not for you either. The essential message of this movie is that slavery never ended, and it requires two things to keep it alive. First, the ex-slave has to be kept destitute. That means he has to be kept not owning any land and not owning any of the basic necessities on which his life so desperately depends. That is why 99.9% of all ex-slaves today are forced to continue working for the enrichment of the ex-slave masters. And that is why, because of the ex-slaves' landless and destitute situation, the ex-slave master can always count on having a large supply of traitors that love stretching out their hands for bribes. This is the strategy that was developed on the plantation to keep the ex-slaves stretched out in a never-ending race that barely satisfies his daily needs. In this way, his mind slips into a stupor where he would sacrifice the struggle for his total liberation in exchange for a measly crumb. Now, the second thing that slavery needs in order to remain alive is to keep the ex-slave drugged, doped, and domesticated. That is why the ex-slave has been schooled and churched to imagine that he has been freed. That is why, from a very early age, his mind is Walt Disneyed, so that it will always be magnetically attracted to white kryptonite, and he is easily hypnotized by falsehood. And it is also the reason why the ex-slave master and his disguised front men can walk into any community today with a bag of money and set the ex-slave on a pathway of distraction that will never lead to African liberation. Freedom from slavery cannot be measured by the fact that some ex-slaves are now able to live in the pretty rented houses up in hamburger heaven. It must be measured by the fact that all across planet Earth, a large majority of Africans are still jacketed and colored and tied and wigged and permed and bleached in the image of Europeans, and still answer to the names of Europeans. It must also be measured by the fact that all across planet Earth, a large majority of Africans live in destitute mode, like people picking up the pieces in the wake of a large hurricane or earthquake. And it must also be measured by the fact that all across planet Earth, the souls of a large majority of Africans are being auctioned in the human marketplace so that a white man can still go anywhere in the world and buy a Negro very cheap. But a middle class mentality tries to not dwell on slavery, not recognizing the truth that slavery is still the main demon in black life today. Because, like a devastating hurricane, it has handed down strangling economic and psychological chains that urgently need to be broken in order to prevent race extinction. That hurricane is chattel slavery and colonialism with their far-reaching tentacles that stretch right into the present, ensuring that the ex-slave, because of the robbery, is still being forced to continue working for the enrichment of the ex-slave masters. enormity of the robbery committed against the African is such that today he walks the earth landless and totally dependent on other races to employ him and keep him alive. Now even the victims themselves have started to adopt the white alien invaders narrative that says being robbed of your land and also 400 years of your time and labor is nothing. Get over it and move on. And so the spotlight is constantly kept on the crimes that are committed in the ghetto by the mentally scarred children of those dark ages of chattel enslavement and slave-breaking brutality who have now been colonized and reduced to the status of crabs in a barrel. This is the ex-slave master's strategy to control the narrative and distract attention from the white alien invaders who created the landless, congested barrel of poverty and frustration that generates bitterness and desperation on a daily basis.